Ryan, will you tell me something that you believe about self-storage investing that might surprise us?
I think the most surprising thing about self storage is that it is used because of life events. People that have death, displacement, downsizing, and divorce in their life use self storage. And so when I think about the surprise is that self storage really does excellent in two parts of the economy: when the economy is growing and doing really well, and then also when it's not doing very well, when there's displacement. Because death, displacement, divorce, downsizing are all things that generally happen when things aren't going well. But what's interesting is that self storage is actually pretty flat and doesn't perform exceptionally well when things are just sort of humdrum and sort of ticking along, kind of like they are in today's economy, where housing values aren't really down, but housing sales aren't really, they're flat. They're the flattest they've been in 30 years. There's not a lot of moving, downsizing. There's not a lot of disruption in the economy right now. And so self storage has been pretty flat for the last year or two. So I think that's an interesting part about self storage that a lot of people don't realize. It's not just Americans with too much stuff; it's Americans that are on the move.
Welcome to the source of commercial real estate, where we talk to the experts in non residential commercial real estate so you can grow your business, find a competitive advantage, and use real estate to live the life that you want. I'm your host, Jonathan Hayek. I'm a former public school teacher who found financial freedom through residential real estate investing, and now I invest in commercial properties, particularly small industrial. Today, I have the privilege of talking with Ryan Gibson with Spartan Investment Group. They have hundreds of millions of dollars of assets under management in the self storage space. I've talked with Ryan before. I am thoroughly looking forward to another great conversation. Ryan, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jonathan. Thanks. It's nice to be back and talking about self storage. A lot of interesting things have happened in the last since we spoke last time. So it's very good.
For listeners that aren't familiar with your story, why don't you briefly go over a little bit about your background and what your work looks like today?
Yeah, so I got started in the airlines. When I was in high school, I learned how to be a pilot, and I actually was a Cutco knife salesman. Saved up a lot of money and got all my flight training done, mostly in college and in high school as my senior year, and got hired at the airlines at a super young age. I was 21, got hired at the airlines, in a little airline called Masaba Airlines, which was Northwest Airlink back in the day. And over the last 17 years I spent as an airline pilot, but I've always been entrepreneurial. Always wanted to have that extra side hustle, that extra passive income stream coming in. So I started pilot housing crash pads around airports and was able to provide pilot housing before they started their trips. So I did a little bit of that, and then sold that business to my partner and transitioned into some FAA consulting work, and enjoyed that for a few years, working in and around Washington D.C. on a lot of regulatory wide sweeping changes that happened out of a crash that happened in Buffalo back in 2009. But really got my start in real estate when I started Spartan Investment Group with Scott Lewis, my business partner, and we did everything from residential land development, condo buildings, and then we transitioned into self storage in 2017, and then just grew a big portfolio of about 800 million of assets. We've raised about $450 million from retail investors, active mom and pop investors, 100K at a time, and now have a storage portfolio sweeping 14 states, about 5 million square feet, about 35,000 units, and we're vertically integrated now. So we have a construction company, property management, storage brand called Free Up Storage, and then we build self storages for others. We build our own, and then we also have an investment shop, so we can invite limited partners to invest in our offerings. So from airline pilot to self storage guy, I know that that's not a not a natural career progression for a pilot, but that's my story. So that's where I am today.
And You and I talked a little over 2 years ago. And if listeners are interested in kind of the nitty gritty of how self storage works, we went into great depth in that conversation. So listeners should definitely check that out. And you've been on lots of other podcasts talking about the nitty gritty of self storage. Today, I'm interested in hearing about your growth. Spartan has made it sounds like a ton of growth in the last couple years on the construction side and becoming vertically integrated. Can you go over the last couple years how Spartan has changed and evolved?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of operators, we grew a lot in 2021 when interest rates were low and cap rates were at a place where you could make a good margin just on the cap rates, interest rate spread. And we bought a lot of properties, and so we scaled the company pretty quickly with our own internal property management arm and construction arm. Both buying and building storages. And we went through the challenges of 2021. I think anybody listening to this that knows real estate, 2021 was a very challenging time because that was peak values, and it was also peak occupancy, peak rental rates for a lot of investors who then transitioned into a um, higher interest rate environment and softening customer demand, whether it be multifamily or self storage. And it's just part of the investment cycle. It's we all, as investors, we all go through different parts of the cycle. But post sort of that 2021 peak, we've really been focused inward on operations. We've been building a property management arm. We've been upgrading our team, turning over our staff for higher quality people. And we've been continuing to be strategic about where we invest. I mean, obviously, we've invested a lot less in this higher interest rate environment as we go through the bottom, I think, of where the market is. But in the last call it 18 months or so, 12 months, we've been picking up our buying activity again, as there's been a lot of great deals that have trickled onto the market. I think that sellers aren't as equipped to sell in a time where their expectations might be really high. They might be thinking and dreaming of what 2021 was and getting met with the reality that their properties aren't worth as much as that peak time. And so we've been finding some great deals, but it's very difficult to find great deals because fewer investments are trading. People know that there has been a little bit of softening demand, and this might not be the best time to sell because financing is high and values are down a little bit. So we've had to work a lot harder to find opportunities, but in the last, call it 12 months, we've added about $150 million in new storage properties to our portfolio, and we've continued to make the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies by growing our portfolio in the way that we have. And but really, the last 2 years have been getting back to the basics. Blocking and tackling, making sure that we can take care of our customers, making sure that our growth is smart, taking on fixed rate debt only in our portfolio and kind of refinancing. We've all of our loans now are fixed rate loans in our portfolio, and that's been kind of helping us get through some of the challenges of 2021. So long answer there, but kind of going through what a lot of people have gone through in this cycle. If you were a buyer in 2021, kind of came out the backside with some operational challenges, financing challenges of that time. But now really see an opportunity to pick up some great investments.
Talk about your growth over the last couple of years. Can you point to any keys to your growth? I mean, your team has expanded. You've expanded your verticals. You've become more integrated. You're doing more construction. Can you point to any keys for Spartan's growth while operating in a difficult investing and growth climate?
Yeah, I would say clarity in our plan. We've had a strategic planning process every 3 years. We go through where we want to go, what goals and key objectives do we have, key results do we want to get out of a plan, and alignment and getting all of our employees on the same page. There isn't a single Spartan that you could go to and ask, hey, what's the plan? What's the vision? What's the goal? What's the 3-year goal for Spartan? You could ask everybody from our CEO down to a store manager would know what our strategic plan says in it. So I would say sticking to the basics on planning and clarity of vision has helped us grow because everybody knows what the plan is. I would say reinforcing what our mission, vision, values are have kept people on the rails and stick to our guns on our mission, vision, values, and reinforce those in weekly sync meetings. Um, we do uh, we do a process of there's a book called Traction. Gino Wickman wrote it. We follow the guidelines of that book, and we do kind of an amalgamation of a couple of different things, but we stick to a structure. We do level 10 meetings um, every Monday with our leadership team. We focus on the basics, and I would say there isn't anything special or flashy. It's just very driven company, very driven people. And I would say, probably something unique outside of that is, 2021, 2020 and 2021 were very difficult hiring years. There was not a lot of people to hire, and there was a lot of need to hire people, and wages were going up, and it was very competitive environment. I think a lot of companies maybe overhired or hired the wrong people. And so we've done a lot. We haven't been afraid to turn over underperforming staff. And so we do a top grading methodology where we rank our employees on a 9 block system. And we've been constantly showing our employees where they need to improve to get to that peak performance. And then also showing the door to folks that have not performed. And I think you're kind of, real estate has undergone a lot of stress from the operator level because interest rates are high, not a lot of transaction volume, so your revenue is down. Customers are harder to keep and retain and keep in this inflationary environment. So you got to get lean and you got to get efficient. And so all kinds of stuff have come out of that, from turning over our operations team to hire producers to making improvements in technology in our portfolio. But there's been a whole bunch of stuff that's happened in the last couple of years to keep growing and sustaining our operation to be successful.
On the topic of having clarity for your business, I think it's really common for when mostly smaller time investors, when things get tough, they pivot. They say, "Oh, that the old way doesn't work anymore. Things are too hard. I'm not going to do multifamily anymore. Now I'm doing industrial. Self storage doesn't work anymore. Now, oh, retail is hot. I'm going to do retail." Has there ever been any temptation for you all to pivot or expand away from self storage when things got hard over the last couple of years?
It's definitely been topic of conversation, but we put that in our annual roadmap. We decide, we have a 3-year plan, and then we set our annual plans. And, we come together as an executive leadership team every year. Actually, our planning sessions is next month for 2025. And we're going to set the conditions for the year. We're going to say, we're only focused on self storage this year. We're only focused on these markets, these assets, these types of investments and opportunities. Here's our goals within those assets, or the targets of the OKRs, objective key results. But we stay focused on what we're focused on, right? We start chasing, we've considered other asset classes, of course. But, before we switch to an asset class, we're not just going to, watch one webinar and go, 90 degrees to the right. We're going to, we're going to take some time. We're going to learn everything about that asset class. We're going to learn about the uniqueness of it. And probably more importantly is, and this is something I've learned over the last decade of doing this. There's somebody out there that's smarter in that asset class than you are. And, you're the entrepreneur, you are running, me and Scott, we run a company. We're not real estate guys. I mean, we're real estate guys by virtue of doing real estate, but we're hiring the right people to man the operation in their respective agencies. So for example, we have a construction company now that's on track to do $100 million a year in construction. Half of it's ours, half of it's external third party. Scott and I don't have a construction background, but what we did was we went and recruited a president of our construction company to helm that business, right? Because he knows everything about construction, right? So we have great people, met our values, and has the leadership chops to take over a construction company. Same thing in self storage. I don't have a 25-year record in self storage, but the person who's our vice president of operations has 25 plus year career in it, working for a magnitude of different things. If we're going to go into a new asset class, we're not going to go be the heroes in that asset class. We're going to go find somebody who's working for a publicly traded REIT or another company that specializes in that asset class, and we're going to bring that person into our organization and let them be the expert in that trade versus us trying to go fiddle around with it and try to figure out, how this really works. I think that's critical because I think we get confused with trying to be an expert in everything, and that's really not a way, in my opinion, to scale in the way that we have.
Ryan, one of the things that has always concerned me about investing in self storage is the management piece. I have, on a couple occasions, I've rented a storage unit at different parts of my life, and I walk into this office and there's someone sitting at this desk and they're watching a movie, and I walk in and like I'm bothering them. I'm like, I'm sorry to interrupt you watching your movie. I'd like to, I'm here to check in to get my unit. And so, I have that's the kind of image that I have of how management in self storage goes. So you all have made a ton of progress in management. What have been some of the keys to successfully managing your properties?
Yeah, and let me just acknowledge that operations is very difficult. I think anybody getting into commercial real estate, if they undervalue the operational challenges, and you're going to have a property management division, or you're going to be directly in charge of managing your assets, is completely going to be disappointed because it's a lot of work. When you have 14 states in your portfolio and 35,000 units and 5 million square feet, now you're really going to have an operational challenge on your hands, right? And you got to really have the right people, and that starts with a leader who can hire other leaders who can, cover the country in the correct way. And that culture, mission, vision, values trickles down to the store level so that when Jonathan shows up, there's not a movie and you don't feel bothered. The person actually stands up, they're in a uniform, and they greet you in a way where you feel valued and appreciated, right? And so that's our goal. That's blocking and tackling. That's basics. And it's hard to scale that. And it's especially challenging when you have a self-storage facility, a $10 million self-storage facility, and pick a town, USA, right? Or, some random area that you bought it in, you got a $10 million property and you need one person. That's it. You need one person to run it. And you want that one person to be, the awesome ombudsman of the property. They got to be a good steward of, cleaning it and cleaning the units and changing locks and, managing landscaping and pest control and all these things. Oh, and by the way, they've got to be really good at sales, and they've got to be great at customer service and all these things. That's a lot to ask of somebody that you're going to pay 20 to 25 bucks an hour to. It's a lot. And then that one person quits, and now you've got nobody at your property, right? So that's a difficult operation, right? You may think, oh, storage is easy. You just automate everything and then just let it go, and it's no big deal. I heard that, trust me, we run into tons of sellers of properties, family offices, who say, we thought this was going to be really easy to man this storage in Tennessee from California. And, we've owned this thing for a year and we're out. We're out of this thing. We don't want anything to do with this property because it's a nightmare to manage, because it's such a, you need that one person, but good luck finding that one person. There's some markets where it's impossible to hire anybody. So how do you overcome those challenges? How have we overcome those challenges? You have to have great leadership, and then you've got to focus on the blocking and the tackling. But then you got to just sort of accept what you're going to get. You're going to get it's hard to find that unicorn property manager. Okay? So what you do then is maybe you focus on just the maintenance, cleanliness, and operational side of things. You can find that pretty much any market. Someone who's going to go cut the grass, do the weeds, do the pest control, sweep out the units when customers turn over, change the locks, change the light bulbs, etc. And then you take away the need for somebody to be sitting there watching a movie. And so what we've started to do is something that only 3 operators in the country have done, in the world, really. Go Store It, Reliant Self Storage, and Spartan have only adopted this new technology. And it's a kiosk, but it's not everybody has a kiosk. Kiosks have been around for a long time, but it's a kiosk with a video screen on it. And so when you walk in now, you don't walk in and see somebody sitting at a computer, playing a movie. You walk in and there's a huge screen and a person shows up on it in our free up storage uniform. They're in our headquarters in Colorado, and this person is highly trained to be over the top customer service greeting to you. And you don't have to know computers because you're going to walk in and this person automatically turns on in 6 seconds of you walking in and says, Jonathan, welcome to Free Up Storage. How can I help you? Hey, I'm here to rent a unit. I'm here to do this. I'm here to do that, whatever it might be. And you don't got to figure out the computer and, look in this kiosk and it's like not like an ATM machine, right? It's like a real person who's smiling, who's highly trained in sales. And we've got a dispersed method across our portfolio now to where we can leverage this high touch sales with this technology to where we don't have to have a highly trained salesperson at the property. And the nice thing is you can even expand the hours. You can also have multiple people manning this screen, and they can cover 5 properties at a time. And then if they're busy talking to a customer at one, then it automatically grabs the other manager who's on the screen as well. And it's this really seamless technology. So I think that's critical to have some type of backup when you acknowledge that these managers are going to be tough to find in these tertiary markets that we operate in. So that's some of the things we're doing to kind of overcome the challenges.
I love that. That makes a ton of sense. And to be clear, these are real people. This is
Yeah.
not some AI generated whatever that appears on the screen.
You ever rent a car, at Hertz Enterprise, pick a place, and there's a huge line, right? And you're like, and then you look over to the right and there's that kiosk and you pick the phone up and then there's a person that like, hey, how's it going? Who are you? Put your license up to the screen. That's what it is.
Okay.
It's the same thing. And I don't want to wait in line. I want to get my car and get going. Right. And so, let me give you a story. It's actually interesting. When we started rolling this out, I actually stood in our call center and watched it work for, the first, and it's very fascinating. I think it has less to do with booking the customer, which is obviously it's all about revenue. But I think the big benefit is taking care of your current customers. So we like to cluster our properties together in a market. So we don't just buy one property on an island in the middle of nowhere. We like to have 4 or 5 facilities in a given market. We like to scale to over 150,000 square feet to whatever market we're going into. So that way you can take the payroll out of one of your properties. You can say, hey, that's a little property. It doesn't really need somebody sitting there all day. But there's a manager who's manning the property, 5 minutes down the road. So we had a customer walk into the office on this smaller property. No one's there. Open the office door. The screen comes on with our, over the top salesperson. And they say, hey, welcome to Free Up Storage. How can I help you? Hey, the gate doesn't work. The gate's broken. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And let me take care of that. They get on the phone with the guy or gal down the street. They come over, they fix the gate. Life is good. And so that would have been, think about what that would have been. That would have been a customer who would have gone, opened the door, no one's there. Now they've got all their stuff in their truck. They can't get into the property. And what's that review going to be? It's going to be a 1-star review out of 5. And they're going to say, no one's here. This place is unmanned. And I don't feel good about, it's brought, it's business hours and there's no one here, right? Really bad stuff can happen. Instead, you get an overly enthusiastic person who's going to help you. So I think this technology is just going to really take off. And I'm happy to be one of the first adopters of it in our portfolio. And it's going to make a big difference, and I think in the industry, as it gets more and more challenging to hire people, for these wages in these random markets and find, that perfect candidate.
Yeah, one thing that I really like about it is the person that you hire, the person that appears on the screen doesn't have to be local to Lexington, Kentucky, you find a rock star in Denver, more populated area. You find someone that you're comfortable with, that you like, because sometimes it's like, you find this great employee, and you're like, man, I wish I could, have 10 of them. But I've got these facilities all over the country, and they can't be in more than one place at a time. But now they can.
Exactly.
Now they
Yeah.
can. Now that awesome person can be in literally in multiple places at once.
And here's the thing, that awesome person might be great at greeting and selling you, but they might be terrible at managing a property, right? And so now, like, you can just get the person who's really good. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying, geez, I mean, that you're talking about a unicorn, somebody who can manage a property, sell people up, let's be realistic. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. So really just need to find somebody who's over the top. Hospitality, and they're overly enthusiastic because that's their job. That's what they do. And then the maintenance person can be the maintenance person, taking care of the facility. And now we kind of know that, like, hey, we need somebody who specializes that in this market. So we could have a roving manager who's fixing certain things. Um, yeah. So I think that's what I'm most excited about. We're going to start to see our payroll expense go down a little bit later in 2024 as we sort of unman or reduce hours on certain sites. And honestly, the customers kind of like it. I mean, we can be open from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. because you can control the office magnetized door locks with, through this system. And it's pretty amazing, actually. So
One of the things you and I have talked about is the difficulty of learning about commercial real estate. And I know you are doing your part to serve the masses in educating people. I know you've written a book. You also have a podcast. You want to start by talking about your book. What is it? Who's it for? What's it about?
yeah, so we actually, I noticed that nobody has really written a good book on commercial real estate due diligence. I mean, there's books out there, there's white papers and ebooks and things like that, but we wrote a book on how you do due diligence. We have a 700-point due diligence checklist. We took all that up, we made it all very applicable. We wrote different chapters and sections on that. And we actually, in the book, we give you a checklist so you can go through each thing and check it off as you go through. So we just released that, and that's for anybody who has any interest in real estate. Really, could be applicable to residential investing, could be applicable to commercial investing. Pretty incredible. Yeah, so that's available to your listeners. If they want to send me an email or something, I can get you set up with a book. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, due diligence, in my experience, when deals have not gone according to plan, it almost always goes back to due diligence. It's something that I missed in due diligence, forgot to look at, overlooked, pretended didn't exist. And so I think like you said, it's a really underrepresented aspect of commercial real estate. And then tell me about the podcast. Since we've last talked, you have
Yeah.
launched your own podcast. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the best part of my day is doing my podcast. I love it. It's so much fun to interview people. It's called Passive Income Pilots. And so it was born out of helping the aviation community learn tactics and strategies in investing. And I think it goes beyond real estate. So if you're interested in vending machines, stock, bonds, mutual funds, asset allocation, venture capital, angel, real estate, depreciation, tax saving strategies, short-term rental loophole, becoming a real estate professional, all those things we talk about on the show. And we have some amazing guests. We've had Super Bowl NFL champions on the show, and we've had news anchors, or not news anchors, but investment professionals from the major media outlets like CNBC's Fast Money. Guy Adami's been on the show, and it's been a lot of fun. And the podcast has gotten a lot of traction. So, especially if you're a pilot listening to this, like, it's a must listen to show. It's gotten very good feedback on that.
Ryan,
So.
I always enjoy talking with you. You always have so much value to share. You were one of the first guests on my podcast, and
Nice.
it's one of my favorite episodes because you just brought the value. I was asking you about self storage, and you just brought the value from the first question. So Always appreciate chatting with you. It sounds like things are going really well with Spartan. If listeners want to connect with you, learn more about Spartan, where would you like to send people?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Ryan Gibson. My profile's on there from Seattle, Washington. But you can also email me, Ryan at Spartan-investors.com.
Great. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me.
Yep. Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, reach out to either one of us. We love talking about commercial real estate and we would love to connect with you. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Until next time.